Hello viewers, I think Gran Turismo 7 has a big car problem. Take a look. This is update 1.61, which has dropped today, and this is a Nissan Qashqai. We also have whatever this thing is, a Honda N1. Okay, the point I'm trying to get to is this game is over 3 years old now. Have they made the right decisions with regard to the car list? Quite a few SUVs added recently and a distinct lack of race cars. The car list has come under some scrutiny. There's a lot of cars that are in previous Gran Turismos that aren't in this game. The total car count for this game is a lot lower than it was in Gran Turismo 5 and 6. And you could argue, especially with regard to race cars, some other games are taking some big steps forward. Let's take a quick look at the 31 cars that have been added to the game in the last 12 months. And the thing that is standing out to me is that in nearly every update, they seem to add a rather pointless SUV. Now, to be fair, I do think there is room in this game for this type of car. Gran Turismo has always had a wide range of cars. These cars are great as long as there's also lots of other race cars and road cars and sportier cars as well. Now, to be fair, out of this 31 cars, 12 of them I would say are sort of sporty road cars. You know, we have the Mission X, we have a couple of Ferraris and Chevrolets, a couple of Porsches. We have one VGT car, which aren't always the most popular. And 4 of them, I would say, are race cars. We have the Impreza rally car, the Delta rally car, and then the classic Mercedes, and then the fictional but classic Formula 1 car. And then we have a couple of very quirky cars like the Suzuki Carry and the Mercedes Unimog. And you could even argue the Renault Kangoo and the Suzuki Jimny. So what do we make of that? Is that a good set of cars? And yes, a lot of SUVs and kind of goofy cars. But should we be thankful that this game is 3 years old and they're still adding cars for free? Or is it not good enough and should we be requesting more race cars and more classic cars from the older games to be added in? And I think it's worth mentioning at this point that other games are definitely doing a really good job on this front, I would say. Le Mans Ultimate, certainly in terms of pure racing, is doing a really solid job. It has all of the modern GT3s, all of the hypercars as well. You could even argue that Forza Motorsport is doing a better job with regard to, let's say, certainly race cars that are being added. You know, the cover car is the modern Cadillac hypercar. Forza has also had the M4 GT3. It has the Porsche 992 GT3 car as well. iRacing will always have its wide array of cars, obviously for a much higher price. And AC Evo, quite hard to tell what's going on with that game, but it has a good range, I would say. Now, when it comes to the race cars in this game, now this is quite an important subject, and I think it's going to divide some fans as to whether or not we should or shouldn't have new ones, or should this game really be focusing on this. But we're going to jump into the Group 3 cars quickly. Now, this game is unusual in a way because some of the cars here aren't actual real GT3 cars. If it doesn't have a date, then it isn't strictly a real car, so like the F-Type here. But if it does have a date, like the Huracan here, then it is a real car. And there's about 13 brands which currently race in GT3, which are in the game. Only 4 of those have a brand new up-to-date GT3 car. So Mercedes has the AMG, which is the up-to-date car. Aston Martin has the V12 Vantage and the DBR9, whereas the Vantage came out in 2018, and that is their current GT3 car. Audi has the R8 LMS Evo. The Evo 2 came out in 2021. So that kind of is the correct car, but it kind of isn't as well. Now, BMW is quite out of date. 2016, the M6, whereas the car they race these days is the M4, which came out in 2022. They even have an Evo version, which came out in 2025. Now, Chevrolet with the Corvette, there is actually a new Z06, which came out in 2023, which isn't in the game. And then you get to Ferrari, the 458 Italia, came out in 2013, whereas the car they use these days is the 296, which is not in the game. Ford has the LM race car and the GT race car and the Mustang, but there is a new Mustang, which isn't in the game, which came out last year. The Huracan, there is an Evo version of this GT3. The Lexus RCF from 2017 is actually their most recent one. The McLaren has the 650S, but there is actually a 720S these days and an Evo. And quite a big one, Porsche has the RSR, but that is the 991. We, of course, have had the 992, which came out in 2022. So I know there's a lot of games out there which focus on GT3, and of course, we could just go and play those. But it's definitely fair to say that Gran Turismo 7 is lacking behind, I think, in this category. And this is quite a big debate. It's a very popular category, and you can go and play it on other games. And yes, it isn't always what Gran Turismo has been about, because Gran Turismo, you could argue, isn't purely a racing game. It is also in some ways a car game, and therefore motorsport isn't always its main priority. However, seeing a couple of these cars updated to their newer versions would go down very well, I think. Now, that's only talking about brands that exist in the game already. How about the Bentley Continental? Bentley aren't in the game. And for something a bit more left field, Morgan had a Aero 8 GT3 car, so that could be fun. Ferrari also had the 430 Scuderia. There's quite a lot of older GT3 cars which are available, I suppose. But let's quickly talk about Group 1. Now, Group 1 is it's a weird one because we have a mix of modern LMP cars, one hypercar. You have the Group C cars, and then you have a load of VGTs. So it's definitely a bit of a mishmash. But having just spoken about Le Mans Ultimate, this is a category where Gran Turismo falls short, I would say, because the Toyota GR010 Hybrid is the only sort of modern hypercar in the game. Please do excuse the Aston Martin livery, which makes this completely cursed. The Valkyrie road car is in the game, but the Valkyrie hypercar race car is not in the game. But yeah, this category is definitely lacking, like big time. You know, cars they could add: the Peugeot 9X8, the Porsche 963, Aston Martin Valkyrie, Cadillac V-Series, the BMW M Hybrid, the Alpine A424, and then the Ferrari 499P. So definitely a few cars there that this game is missing in this category. I suppose we've got to touch upon the argument, why not just go and play those cars in another game? Which is fair enough, okay, if I want to play the M Hybrid, I can just go on Forza and play it. But the thing is, if you're a fan of Gran Turismo, you want to play it on Gran Turismo. So I think that's also a fair argument. And now on to Group 2. This is probably the most cursed category in this game. I mean, I don't know what is going on here. It's a very strange amalgamation of Super GT cars, some GT1 cars, and then one modern Class 1 DTM car. So you see some of the dates here, 2016, 2016, 2016. And you have a couple of the cars from 2008 as well. Now, let's touch upon the Super GT category. Firstly, I'm very sorry for stealing your name. But again, there's more modern cars than this. We have the Nissan Fairlady Z, the Lexus LC500H, a newer NSX, and then a Honda Civic Type R, which competes in Super GT as well. But what about DTM? Now, we have this modern Class 1 car here, the Audi RS5. We are missing the BMW M4 Turbo and the Aston Martin Vantage DTM cars. So this car kind of stands on its own in the game, which is a bit sad. But there's definitely room for older race cars like the Mercedes 190e, the C-Class, the Opel Calibra. Because if we go to Group 4, of course we have the Alfa Romeo 155. And this was actually a DTM car from the 90s. And again, it kind of stands on its own without its counterparts to race against. Now, of course, we have BOP in the class, so it's meant to be balanced with the rest of these, which it often isn't. But guys, where do we begin with Group 4? I mean, I thought Group 3 was bad, but Group 4 seems to have much more in the way of the fictional cars. And I suppose I should pose this question. So quite a few of these aren't really real GT4 cars, they're kind of fictional. In some ways, that's quite cool, I think. But I think surely you'd probably want some more actual real-world cars that race in this category. For example, my race car, the BMW M4 GT4 Evo, which isn't in this game. We do have the previous generation M4, as you can see, but I think this category is actually probably lacking more so in terms of real-world cars. When you consider Alpine, Aston Martin, Audi, BMW, Ford, Ginetta, Lotus, McLaren, Mercedes, Nissan, Porsche, and Toyota, none of those cars have their most recent GT4 car in the game, except for maybe Toyota with their Supra, although there is an Evo version of this car. So it's clear that Gran Turismo has their approach. They make cars in this category. As long as you've got BOP and it's balanced, then I guess to some extent that's fine. I do like the authenticity of having modern, real cars, especially in these race categories. And Group 4 is definitely lacking. Now, speaking of the updates, some interesting points with regard to the classes we just spoke about. The most recent Group 1 car to be added to the game was in July 2024, update 1.49. It was the Genesis VGT. If you want to know about a real-world Group 1 race car, you have to go back to May 2022 when they added the Toyota GR010. So basically when the game came out. For Group 2, the most recent car was added in March 2024. That was a Toyota GT1. For Group 3, the most recent car was April 2023. That was the Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evo, and that was in update 1.32. And then for Group 4, they've only ever added one car to this category in the entire life of the game, and that was the Mazda 3 back in September 2023. And it's an interesting car for sure, but it isn't actually a real-world race car. Now, something that does hold back the more modern Gran Turismo games compared to the old ones is that now the level of detail has to be so much higher when they model any of the cars and add them to the game. Which is why you'll see the highest car count, I think, in Gran Turismo 5 and 6. Quite a lot higher, over 1,000 cars in both of those games. Whereas for GT Sport and GT7, that has dropped. I mean, this game has over 500. It's still a very good amount, but it is half of what GT6 had. So that perhaps is a problem in itself. You have to put so much more work in to get one more car into the game compared to, I think, what you had to do in the past. And on a similar note, I found this. It's a page which goes through all the cars which have been in previous Gran Turismos, but are not in Gran Turismo 7. The list does go on quite a long time. I'm not going to count this, but it's probably at least 400 or 500 cars. Now, it's probably quite unreasonable to expect Gran Turismo to add every single one of those cars into the game, but there's a select few that I would definitely like to see. And it begs the question, should Polyphony dig out some classics from the previous games to add into GT7? I think it's fair to say that when they added the Suzuki Escudo and the Toyota GT1, for example, there's a lot of positivity about those cars. They're really cool cars. They are classics from the early Gran Turismo games. Could they do more of that? I think so. To go through this extensive list, to name but a few, how about the Gillette Vertigo race car? Or how about this, the lunar roving vehicle where you could drive on the moon? Or what about this, the Lister Storm race car? They need to bring this one back for sure. This could be a good ad. The first car ever. Takes about 5 years to do a lap of the Nürburgring. Or the Panos Esperante. I mean, look at it. It's such a weird looking thing. And I used to love driving this thing in the earlier games. Gran Turismo 3, I think it was. Likewise this, the TVR Speed 12. Or who can forget this one? The Toyota Minolta. This car was the GOAT. I mean, to be honest, we could go through this list at length and pick out so many of them. I mean, maybe not all of these Nissan GTRs and all of these Nissan Skylines and Silvias. There's about 5 billion of them. But there's a very good selection of cars they could potentially bring back in, maybe. On a similar note to what we've just spoken about, brands that aren't in Gran Turismo 7 at all. And you might be surprised. Lotus, Opel, Bentley, Cadillac, Ginetta, Acura, to some extent, Caterham, Holden, Koenigsegg. There's some big brands there which do not have any cars in the game. And in the case of Lotus, that's quite sad because there's been quite a lot of Lotus cars in this series before. Now, let's be positive. This game has well over 500 cars, which is actually a very good number. Not many games can kind of boast that many cars in the level of detail to which they are in Gran Turismo 7. Also, they are still adding cars for free more than 3 years after the game has launched. So there's definitely a lot of upside. I think us Gran Turismo fans, we expect a lot. We want a lot from this series because it has been so good. I think Gran Turismo does have a good car list. I think that's unquestionable, but there's definitely some tweaks it could make and some improvements and some additions with respect especially to race cars and I think some classic cars as well, which I think would make a lot of people happy. But guys, please do let me know your thoughts. I want to know what everyone thinks on this. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.